Hi, everybody. Right at the beginning of this message, I have to sound a warning that the event that was described in Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 12, one of the events to do with Jesus, I'm taking that event and looking at it. It's a most unusual event. So I'm looking at it in a very imaginative fashion, and I hope I will not offend anybody. I hope you'll appreciate my, taking it and looking at it as it possibly could have happened all those years ago. In fact, the scene, is set in Palestine. It's set sometime in the early first century AD. And I want you to imagine the following with me. I want to tell you the story of the four cool teenagers. It was a day like any other day for these four. They were sitting around a table in their usual haunt, sipping the equivalent of maybe Coca-Cola today. And they were discussing what was trending on that day, the coming of the one called Jesus. They remarked how young, how direct, how well built he was. Imagine the arms, the chest, and shoulders a carpenter of those days must have had. One of them said, "Remember the time he got bugged with those money changers in the temple? Wow. He rolled up his sleeve, and when Sam, the chief of the union, saw that bicep, he decided to close up early, shut shop early, and he left." And Jesus roared through the crowd with a whip, quite a sight for sore eyes. Another said, "Yeah, and do you know who's with him? Peter. Peter, when he walked down on the beach among those big, foul-mouthed, rugged fishermen, he went right up to Peter and told him to quit the fishermen's union and join him. You could feel the tension in the air. But Peter did it. And you know what kind of man Peter is. So they talked about his miracles and all the amazing things that Jesus had done, especially the amazing story of how he called Lazarus back from the dead. They could hardly wait for his arrival into their little town. The day soon came, and Jesus was to speak at a home in the suburbs. Before the meeting, the four cool heads met at their usual hangout, and one of them said, "Wouldn't it be great if Johnny could go with us? Wouldn't it be wonderful if Johnny could join us?" Now, poor Johnny. He was the fifth member of the gang before he got sick, and there he lay at home, so crippled he couldn't walk. So Johnny was at home. And one of them said, "Let's go and see Johnny, get Johnny." Now, they were concerned. I have 4 points for this afternoon's message. And the first one is concern. Think about that. Concern. What is concern? I suppose it's easy to be concerned, isn't it? We're all concerned about something or the other. We're all concerned about those affected by the wars and battles going on presently in our world. We are all concerned about those who lost everything in the hurricanes and the tornadoes and the violent elements coming at us in different parts of the world. We feel sorry for people who undergo loss, who undergo tragedy. But before long, we forget it. We forget it, just like the news channels. One day it was all about Ukraine, and soon Ukraine was forgotten for Gaza. And now Gaza is forgotten for Lebanon. And so the world goes from one concern to the next. Concern is cheap. Cheap. Our papers are full of incidents where people watched robbery, rape, and murder, but didn't get involved. Oh, yes, they were concerned. Concerned they were, but not enough to do anything about it. If you're going to be like Jesus, we're going to have to take another step beyond concern. Beyond concern. And that's what these four from Capernaum did. Let's go over to Johnny's house, said one of them, one of the guys. And maybe another guy said, oh, but we'll be late. And another one must have said, who cares? Johnny needs us. If we don't help him, who will? Let's move, yelled the fourth. Now that's compassion. Compassion. My second C. The first was concern, and this is compassion. Compassion will take you where the need is. Concern will just talk about it. Concern, we probably talk about it, maybe have a committee meeting, continue to talk and talk. But compassion takes you to the place of need, to the person of need. Maybe I'll just use an illustration, and I've got the permission of the person whom I'm speaking about. In my church here in Ooty, in St. Stephen's Church, we have many elderly people. And one of them is, I won't mention any names, is a person who's 91 years old. She lives alone. And in our church also, there is another lady, a much younger lady, who all of you know. And this lady also lives alone. One day, this younger lady visited the older lady, the lady who was 90 then, last year. And when this younger lady visited the home, small home of the older lady, she got chatting with her. She found out who she was, her name, her background, her history, and how she was living in this small house in Ooty. And she soon discovered that the 91-year-old lady was actually quite ill. She was struggling with life. And there, I think this younger lady made a decision to care for the older one. And so she began visiting her regularly, calling her, chatting with her, Every Sunday she would go and visit her. She brought her food. She spent hours talking, advising, listening. She would take her out to see the doctor. She would do the shopping for her. And on many occasions, she would actually take her home to her own home and care for her over 2, 3 days before bringing her back home. She made a difference in the elder lady's life. She brought cheer. She brought joy. She brought companionship. She brought help, support, fulfillment, some meaning. And one day I asked this younger lady, why? Why does she do this? And the younger lady said, Uncle, I feel God's pleasure when I do this. I feel God's pleasure when I do this. This younger lady was concerned, but she didn't stop with concern. Even till today, she shows compassion. Concern talks about it. Compassion takes you to the person of need. Maybe today God is speaking to us all to go beyond concern and demonstrate compassion. Hey, Johnny, the four exclaimed as they rushed into Johnny's room. Where's your jacket? We're going to take you to Jesus. Johnny looked up from his bed and looked at the four and said, come on, you guys, you must be joking. It's nice of you to think of me. I also heard about this Jesus and I wanted to see him, of course. I've heard all about, well, what about the things he's done. Forget it, man. You're coming with us. We're going to carry you. Right, guys? Yes, chorus the other three. There were four corners to the mat Johnny was on, and there were four friends. And before long, Johnny was dressed and down the street they went. Johnny's mother cried softly as she watched the scene from her window. Oh, my aching arms, groaned one of the guys. How many tons have you gained, Johnny, since you fell ill? Gasping, Johnny laughed and laughed as they griped and groaned, but kept going. And then, one of them said, well, at least we won't have to carry him back home. At least we won't have to carry him back home. Like a shot, they all looked at each other, considering the significance of that statement. A new light came into their eyes, and Johnny seemed to weigh less and less. One of them laughed, and before long, they were all breaking up. That is my third point. Concern, compassion, conviction. Conviction. We don't think much about conviction. We've heard the word. What is conviction? When I was very young and after I came to Christ, I used to hear a lot of testimonies. And very often what I heard went like this. Before I used to do this, I used to do that, but now I don't do that and I don't do this. Before I used to go to this place and that place, but now I don't. Before I had this nasty habit and, I did certain things, but now I don't. But the real question seemed to me was, what are you doing while you're not doing what you say you're not doing? What are you doing while you don't do the things you don't do? Spirituality and maturity are not measured by what you don't do, but by what you do. Some of us on this group, me included, have been followers of Christ for a very long time. We need to remember it's not how long you've been on the road that makes you spiritual, that makes me spiritual, but it's how far down the road you've gone. Yes, how far down the road have I traveled? Anyway, the four cool ones had conviction to believe, and they soon arrived at the house where Jesus was speaking. It was surrounded by newspaper reporters. Yeah, the media. They were all there. You don't believe me? You know, there were people from the Jerusalem Journal. There they were from the Bethlehem Bugle, from the Capernaum Chronicle. Now, how do I know this? I know this because in Mark chapter 2 and verse 4, according to the King James Version, you know, the King James Version, which some people think will be the version they will use in heaven, the King James Version, the authorized version, the KJV, in Mark chapter 4, we read the following: And they could not get nigh unto him for the press. I hope you're all laughing. They tried to enter through the side. They were referred to the rear. They tried to get in the back, but they couldn't. So what did they do? They took Johnny in by the shade of a eucalyptus tree, bought him a cool prune juice, and they told him, "We're really sorry, Johnny, but we can't get any closer." And what did they do? They picked him up and went home. Is that what they did? No, no way. Not these four. They had that fourth quality, the fourth C: courage. Courage, I would say, Christian courage. They weren't about to give up now. Somewhere they found a ladder and some ropes and got up on the roof. Now, here we have mentioned in scripture the first case of sanctified vandalism by teenagers. They started tearing up the roof. Now, below them, you try and picture the scene. Below them, Jesus was addressing an austere, solemn group. Our friends, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, were in the front row, VIPs, with their togas all pressed and proper. Of course, they waited to catch Jesus out on some theological point or the other. That's why they were there. Then suddenly, a piece of tile hit one of them on the head, clunk maybe, and then a pile of dust and straw hit another one. More tile. Another Pharisee got up startled. You can picture the scene: the Pharisees coughing and ducking tiles while muttering, "This is all very unorthodox. We don't do this kind of thing in our synagogue, in our temple, in our church." The mayor of Capernaum was getting hot and bothered because his carefully planned program was disrupted. And Jesus, well, Jesus probably stopped speaking and stepped aside. I mean, who can preach when the roof is caving in? Anyway, everybody was looking up. And what did they see? They saw four perspiring faces looking down through the hole in the roof. It was so tense and no one seemed to be breathing. Then they slowly lowered Johnny. Now watch this. The account says, Jesus, seeing their faith, said, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. Jesus, seeing their faith, said, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. Now, what happens next? Jesus leaves him lying there. Jesus must have smiled because they were believing him for more. But he left them, he sort of made them hold on while he turned his attention round to the Pharisees. And what does he ask them? Which of the two is harder, to bring physical healing or to forgive a person's sin? Physical healing, forgive a person's sin. Which is harder? I think to them the answer was very clear, wasn't it? To bring physical healing, of course. Really? Because that would be a miracle evident to the naked eye. Everybody could see it. The invisible act of forgiveness had far less outward evidence or appeal to them. This is the case today also. Yet, thy sins be forgiven thee must always have priority over, arise, take up thy bed and walk. Our greatest problem is the sin problem. It's not any physical problem. Terrible and painful as physical problems are. Jesus looked into the eyes of the 5 young guys who didn't know the meaning of the word quit, and he said, Arise, take up your bed and walk. And before Johnny could turn his eyes down, his shaking had stopped and his legs were filled with new muscle. He whipped off that mat. The guys on the roof dropped the ropes. And according to the last verse, verse 12, the people fell back, saying they'd never seen anything like it before in their whole lives. I'm sure the 4 guys didn't bother using the ladder to get off that roof, and nobody had to carry Johnny back home either. Concern, compassion, conviction, and courage. Courage resulted in a double miracle. The 4 did not wait till they had a theological degree. They acted now. They did the best they could. They did the best. They knew what was best and they did the best they could. And Jesus responded to that. Do you get it? Do I get it? Get involved. Yes, get involved this week with someone for the sake of the gospel. Reach out to someone at college, at work, at home, wherever you meet people. Stick by him, stick by her, and God will reward your faith. You are never too young, you are never too old to do this. Yes, it may cost you something. It may cost you. Think about these 4. The Capernaum incident cost the 4 something. What could it have cost them? For example, comfort. They didn't get to the house in time to get a front seat. Effort. Johnny wasn't light, and the roof was tough. Popularity. Maybe the mayor, the Pharisees, the homeowner, and citizens were bugged and were bothered, though later on they must have become local heroes. And it must have cost them some money, I'm sure. Because I think the next morning, 5 guys went down to the Capernaum hardware store, bought some tile, clay, and glue, and fixed a certain hole in a roof. But was it worth it? Was it worth it? Ask Johnny. Thank you.